Hello future CA, welcome back to my channel again. So I am on a mission to help you ace your CA exams. So guys, if you are appearing for the CA Inter September 26 attempt and if you are giving group 2 cost and management accounting, then this video is extremely important for you because in the ICAI BoS Fortnight program, the faculty has highlighted some very important areas, important concepts, exam-oriented questions, and preparation strategies for this subject. So in this video, I am going to give you a complete summary of the important points discussed in the program. And most importantly, I will tell you what you should focus on while preparing for your September 26 exams. So guys, if you are new to my channel, please subscribe for more CA related guidance, tips and strategies. So I have prepared a last 4.5 day revision planner for the CA Inter Advanced Accounting. This is for September 26 exam and the planner starts from 28th of August. So in the planner from 28th August to 31st August, I have covered the whole day, and for the 1st of September, the planner covers the first half of the day because the exam is in the second half. So in this planner, I have given slots for revising each chapter and each unit. And there are also separate slots for revising RTP, MTP, previous exam paper, annexure and schedule 3 of the Companies Act. So if you want a structured and stress-free revision planner, the link is in the description and the pinned comments below. Do check it out. So the first important message from the session was that for cost and management accounting, two types of skills are required. One is conceptual understanding and second is extensive practice. So just if you understand the concepts, it's not enough. Written practice is very important because usually it has been noticed that students say that this paper is very lengthy. So only with written practice you can overcome this problem. So you have to understand the concept well as you have to do as much written practice as possible. And the paper consists of 30 marks MCQ and 70 marks descriptive question. So your preparation has to be balanced between concepts, practical problem solving and exam strategy. So during your practice session itself, it's recommended that you keep timer and practice. Solve the answer by yourself, and once you solve the answer by yourself, then you compare with the ICAI answer and check what errors you have done. So if you do this way, then you will be able to solve the answers in the exam as well. Next, the session highlighted some major areas from the syllabus that you need to prepare thoroughly. So these areas include elements of cost, material cost, labor cost, overheads, activity-based costing, integrated and non-integrated accounting, job costing, batch costing, process costing, joint and byproduct costing, service costing, standard costing, marginal costing, budgetary control. And from these areas, standard costing, marginal costing and budgetary control, these were specifically highlighted as very important area. These chapters carry a significant portion of the paper. So standard costing, marginal costing and budgetary control, these three chapters deserve special attention. So in standard costing, some suggestions were given. That is, don't try to memorize the formulas. So the faculty specifically emphasized that conceptual understanding is much more important than just formula memorization. If you understand why a particular variance is calculated and what it represents, even a slightly tricky question becomes easier. So try to understand the concepts behind every formula, and you should try to practice questions particularly relating to material variance, labor variance, fixed overhead variance, missing figure questions. Fixed overhead variance were specifically discussed. The session also highlighted some additional questions and some area that has been added in the study material. So there were some updates to the study material that has been discussed. So some important addition include in service costing chapter, a question based on boiler costing has been added. In process costing chapter, questions involving FIFO and double product has been added. And in standard costing chapter, a question on missing figures has been added. because it has been noticed that students often struggle with such questions. And under overheads, a tricky question involving cost allocation and cost apportionment has been included. Then under budgetary control, questions on flexibility budgets have been added, as this is another area where students frequently find difficulty. Then in joint and byproducts, questions based on physical unit method, contribution method, and other methods of joint allocation has been included in the study material. So don't ignore this newly added or specifically highlighted questions. One of the strongest messages from the session was that hard work alone is not enough. So your strategy while preparing for your examination and your strategy while actually attempting the paper can make a significant difference. So it has been noticed that in the past exams, students spend most of the times while solving MCQ. So you have to remember that MCQ do not require same presentation as descriptive question. So in MCQ, your objective should be only to arrive at the correct answer and select the correct option. So the faculty suggested that approximately 20 to 25 minutes should be sufficient for the MCQ section, depending on the difficulty of the paper. So it is suggested that don't spend excessive time on one case scenario or one MCQ. You have to save sufficient time for the 70-mark descriptive section also. So while practicing in your study leave every day, try to practice as much MCQ as possible so that in your exam you will be able to solve the MCQ accurately as well as in the fast speed. A small improvement in your examination strategy can potentially make a difference of several marks. So questions based on sales mix are also important. So if different sales mixes are given, the optimal mix can be identified as follows using the highest combined PV ratio or lowest break-even point. So for a sales mix question, you may first need to calculate combined PV ratio and then the combined break-even sales. So make sure you practice these questions from the study material RTP and MTP. Another important short-term decision-making concept discussed in the session was the shutdown point. So the basic idea here is very simple. The shutdown point is the level at which the company is indifferent between continuing the operation and shutting down. So basically, in other words, the loss from continuing the operation becomes equal to the loss incurred if the plant is shut down. Don't just memorize the formula. Understand why the formula works. That conceptual understanding becomes particularly important, especially when the examiner adds some tricky questions to your question paper. Now moving on to the standard costing. So the faculty explained standard costing as a kind of diagnostic tool for the management. So the management establishes standards or benchmark and then compares them with actual performance. The difference is the variance, that is the management established standards versus the actual performance. So for examination purpose, you should particularly focus on the following: material variance, labor variance, fixed overhead variance, missing figure questions. Then while solving the fixed overhead variance questions, one useful approach is to convert the information into tabular format. So some important concepts here are cost variance, expenditure variance, volume variance, calendar variance, capacity variance, efficiency variance, and idle time variance. When the idle hours are given, remember to consider idle time variance separately. So understand what each variance represents instead of blindly applying the formulas. So missing figure questions can look intimidating, but the faculty has specifically advised not to jump into conclusions directly. You have to follow the following steps. So step number 1, understand the concept. Step number 2, solve the basic question. Step number 3, practice straightforward study material question. Step 4, move to past examination question. Step 5, practice RTP and MTP. Then step number 6, finally attempt the tricky and missing figure questions. So first you have to ensure your fundamentals are strong and then only you can attempt the missing figure questions. So in this way, the questions relating to missing figures become much more easier. Next, service costing is another chapter that should not be ignored. So, cost unit will depend on the industry. For example, in case of transportation industry, the cost unit will be passenger kilometer, ton kilometer. In case of hotel industry, it will be room days. In case of hospital industry, it will be patient days or bed days. And in case of electricity industry, it will be units generated. So the concepts remain same. Determine the total cost and divide it by the appropriate cost unit. One of the trickiest areas in service costing is calculating passenger kilometers or ton kilometers. So for this, a very practical technique has been suggested. For example, if a vehicle is traveling from point A to C, then C to B, then B to C, and then from C to A, so it is better to draw a route map. So draw this route map first. Then determine the quantity carried on each route, distance travelled, whether goods were unloaded at an intermediate point or whether the vehicle returned empty and so on. And then calculate the ton kilometers. This can make a complicated looking question much easier. And remember, if a vehicle returns empty, the load of the return journey is 0. Do not multiply the return distance by the original load. So usually this common mistake has been noticed in the previous exams. One more suggestion given was, don't skip the joint and byproduct costing chapter. Because its weightage is comparatively less, it has been noticed that in previous exams, some students had skipped this chapter. So in the exam, you can still get a full-fledged question, or questions can be asked from this chapter in combination with the process costing. So some important concepts include joint cost, joint products, byproduct, split off point, further processing cost, methods of joint cost allocation. So if the question does not specifically tell you which method to use, understand the appropriate priority. For example, depending on the information provided, you may need to consider sales value at split off point, net realizable value, physical unit method, contribution or margin based methods where applicable. So the key here is to understand why a particular method is being used. So in this webinar, the faculty has given a very clear preparation strategy. So don't restrict yourself just to watching the lectures or just reading the questions from the study material. You have to solve the question by yourself, because in the examination also you have to solve the question by yourself and you have to present the answer. So you have to do the written practice. Written practice is very important. So your preparation sequence should ideally be as follows. Go through the basic concepts, basic questions from the study material, past exams, and then solve the RTP, MTP, and then solve the tricky or missing figure question. This is particularly important for marginal costing, standard costing, and budgetary control chapter. So if you are preparing for the cost and management accounting for September 26 exam, here are the key takeaways from this BOS fortnight webinar session. So don't choose between understanding the concepts and written practice. You need to do both. You have to get conceptual understanding, plus you have to do the written practice as well, so that you do not feel the paper lengthy in the exam and you can complete the exam. That is, you have to attempt for entire 100 marks. Give special attention to standard costing, marginal costing, and budgetary control. Don't ignore service costing, joint and byproduct costing, process costing, overheads, activity-based costing. And also practice newly highlighted areas and newly added topics in the study material. And written practice is very important, as I mentioned earlier. And in the exam, don't waste excessive time on the MCQ. So for MCQ part, spend 20 to 25 minutes. Most importantly, don't memorize the formula blindly. Try to understand the logic behind each of the formula. So guys, these were the major points highlighted in the ICAI BoS webinar for CA Inter Cost and Management Accounting. So I strongly recommend that you use these points to structure your final preparation. Focus on concepts, practice questions in writing, Solve the ICAI material thoroughly and then move on to MTP, RTP and previous attempt question as well. And remember, costing is not a subject where you can only depend on formula. You have to understand the concepts, practice different type of question and also improve your speed. And also in the exam, attempt the entire 100 marks paper. So guys, if you found this video helpful or informative, please like the video and also share with your CA inter friends. And also subscribe to the channel for more CA exam preparation videos. All the best for your exams. Keep learning, keep practicing. And I will see you all in the next video.